Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Page Turners Plus. We thank you for joining us and we thank you for following us on our YouTube and Facebook pages at Page Turners Plus. Today, we'll be reviewing Jasmine Seeley's Island of Forgetting. To tell you a bit more about Jasmine Seeley and her novel, we have Kesua. Kesua?
Hi everyone. Jasmine Seeley is a Beijing Canadian writer based in Vancouver. Her debut novel, An Island of Forgetting, won the UBC HarperCollins Best New Fiction Prize in 2020 and was published by HarperCollins Canada and the Borough Press UK in spring 2022. With intimate portraits of four very different people from four key generations from Barbados's recent history, The Island of Forgetting is an emotionally fraught delight of a novel. From the patriarch haunted by his experience in a European war, the son who hates him, the brother who fears him, the children who recreate their unhealthy dynamic, the hopes that are crushed, the entitlement of some and the acquiescence of others, and the devastating consequences of all, this novel offers a full ensemble of absolutely unforgettable characters, asking what we choose to forget and why remembering can bring pain, but also healing. This chronology of life in a single family is a metaphor also for Barbados' recent history. It's a wonderful book. Thanks,
All right.
Roger.
Thank you, Kesua. And to get the ball rolling, I could ask, is this a novel about belonging? Who wants to attack that first? Eric?
You read my mind. Uh, yes, it is. It is a novel about belonging. I think belonging is a constant theme in many works of literary fiction, and this one is no exception. Um, from the very beginning, there's as Kesua mentioned in her wonderful synopsis just now. There are fraught relationships, and when we consider fraught relationships, we have to consider that there's this breakdown in people's sense of belonging. Uh, I think all of the main characters, really the three main characters, I would say the four main characters, all have this this tension regarding belonging, whether it's belonging on the island itself or belonging to their respective families or belonging in broader society. So I think all of that plays out in the different characters in a multi generation.
But Roger, isn't it also a novel about identity? And is identity, Eric, part of your articulation of belonging? Because I see them interwoven, especially through this novel, because constantly the characters try to find themselves, and um, it's almost a journey that, in a lot of cases, I found that there was no resolution. Um,
Mm.
so I see identity wrapped like a spiral cord throughout this novel. So I just was curious if belonging is also part of the articulation that you sorry, identity is part of the articulation you mean when you say belonging.
Oh yeah, well, without a doubt. Um, I think that's where the tension lies. If every main character was the same, or at least acted according to convention, then it would be a clean novel. But we have these characters who go against the grain. So and that really is linked to issues of identity and finding oneself. And in a lot of sense, um, I think this is a coming of age novel as well. So yeah, I think definitely identity is linked inextricably so in the issue of belonging.
Can I jump in and say also that I think the way that she draws belonging out and ties it neatly to identity is interesting because there's different levels, right, of belonging. So in some sense, they all belong to Barbados, but in other senses, how they belong is different. So I think we have the character of Cleone, who belongs to Barbados in a very different way from her husband, because she seems to know all the families and all the goings on and the comings and goings. And even though they're both grown and born and raised in Barbados, they both belong to families. The way they belong is different. And we see that also, I think, with Calypso and her schoolmate Nadine, who belong to the same community, but they interact with it so differently that shapes their personalities and their own sense of identity.
Francine, anything to add there?
No, not really. I think you guys have covered it really, really well so
Yep.
far.
The next question that we have, Calypso says, I will never be like my father. I will never fall in love with someone who makes my world smaller. Is that a fair criticism of her mother and her father? Guess where you're shaking your head.
I mean, no way. That's just not how the story went. And it's such a fascinating thing, right? Because how she understands who her parents are is completely about the place that they were in their lives when she was born. It's a complete reflection of how she and how we all see our parents. None of us imagine our parents or know our parents before we enter their lives, right? That's before everyone. That's not actually possible. But also the conceptions we have of our parents are very much based on who they are after they become parents. So later on in the novel, we'll see when she becomes a parent herself, she starts to have quite a conversation with her mother about her early years as a parent, and she discovers a whole new person. And in becoming a parent herself, she understands who her mother is and has then her own kind of conception of her mother, which isn't the one that we have because we met her mother as a young girl or a young woman. But no, I don't think she made his world smaller. I think she offered him a sensibility that nothing else did. And I think we all know, having read the novel, his brother, or sorry, his cousin made his world smaller, quite deliberately. And his aunt and his stepmother type character made his world smaller. And actually, her mother was a lifeline to him. So absolutely unfair criticism.
But
So, yeah,
as Calypso makes a vow to break what, I don't know. I'm not gonna call it a curse, but to break away from the malaise that runs through that ancestry, right? As she may perceive it. Um, I find Kesawa and Roger and Paul and everybody else that from the time the novel starts, from the opening of the novel, okay, um, it's a search for everybody enters this search for I don't want to call it freedom either. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but they want to make their lives different in a significant way. They want to not follow what the generation before um, went through, because it's not something they want to carry forward. Remember, maybe that's why there's a lot of burying of stuff. This is the whole idea of forgetting, I suppose, where I'm not happy about my past. I'm not comfortable. I find there's a lot of that tension going on, maybe with all the characters. So Calypso's vows are everybody else's vows, although not expressed. She vocalizes it, but I think everybody's fighting with that same. Calypso's father was fighting with that same problem, you know, and then got beaten down into submission. He just accepted his lot after a while. So that's my 2 cents.
But isn't that characteristic of like small island life though? I remember like part one was 1962 and then 1979. So like when you consider small island life, especially in that um, period, that sort of post-colonial period in Barbados, I think that would be sort of characteristic where each generation or each preceding generation would think, I need better for myself. And I certainly don't want to be in a situation that my parents and grandparents found themselves. And so I think maybe it isn't necessarily a fair criticism from Calypso, but um, it might be a sort of understandable criticism. I would say it's an understandable criticism. I don't know what anyone else has to say.
Well, I really think it's an unfair criticism, because as we know Calypso doesn't know things about her parents that we do, because we met them when they were young and they were trying to kind of, find themselves. And the way I read it, in fact, Peony was the one who was actually trying to get Atlas to not be small, to be more, even when he got, the huge stumbling block. And she was like, but we can still do it. We can still do this. Let's still do it. And he was the one who said no. And I find it interesting that Calypso says that she doesn't want to fall in love with someone who makes her world smaller, because I feel like that's pretty much what happened to her, even though she was trying to avoid that. I don't know if anyone else feels that way too.
Mm. Yeah, this was the part of, well, this question is what resonated the most with me. Calypso's longing, but Alice's longing even before. I mean, I felt a real sadness for Atlas that he was unable to fulfill his dreams, his desires to go to school abroad. And he had the intelligence. He won the scholarship, but circumstances in his life prevented that. And really, the strong hand of both Cronus and Zeus um, overpowered him in that sense. But I remember as a teenager feeling the same way about New Orleans. And geologically, New Orleans is an island. uh, and I felt that people had small mentalities, and people born, raised, live, die in basically the same neighborhood. There was no way I could do that. And I did feel that those folks were that their world was small. So I understand Calypso's uh question. I understand her desire, but obviously when you look back, you have to understand people in their context. And as I think Kesua so um articulated, that I think that makes the whole criticism a bit unfair, because she didn't take the time to ask her father or her mother how their life was before she came around, and what teenagers do really.
But then
I,
before Kessler comes in there, like I'm just rereading the question. I'm realizing that I feel this is more criticism of her mother than her father. It suggests that she thinks that her mother was the one who restricted her father, and not necessarily the circumstances within her father's family and within Barbados. Kesua?
I was just going to say that I think that this discomfort with the past, I think, as Tony perhaps articulated, or maybe you, Roger, I apologize. Um, I think that's where you really see the kind of transposing or embodiment of kind of the post-colonial melancholy, or whatever the literature people call it. I apologize, I'm going to get it wrong. But it's this idea that it really, for me, sat in for like the discomfort with the heritage of enslavement. It's a history that is difficult and painful that we want to forget or move past, but we can't unless we deal with it, I think. And that's the kind of thing I was alluding to when I said that I feel like the novel really picks up on both like in this life of this very small family, so many kind of Caribbean countries' woes as a nation. It really is a kind of proxy for it. And it's done so cleverly and delicately and subtly, but it is there and you can pick up a lot. And I don't think the dates that the story's set in are accidental either.
I mean, continuing on from and speaking to what Calypso did and Calypso's life, we found out in the story that in her teenage years, Calypso believes that she has a power over boys and men in general, and white tourist men in particular. A very short question: does she?
I mean, to those men, yeah, I guess. Uh, and then that's a part of the story, um, that I think when you read carefully, and I know we read carefully that she wasn't so exceptional. Um, that's what these men, a lot of them would go to Barbados to hunt for, to look for, to experience. So, did she have a particular power? I don't know. I throw it out to the rest of y'all. What y'all think?
So I don't think she necessarily has a power. Because I mean, there is a power dynamic in what she does, but I don't think the power lies with her. There's certainly exploitation in what happens with her. So I don't think necessarily that she has power, but she has sort of a weakness, or she gives opportunity to be exploited. I don't know if there's necessarily a power with her, especially at her age when all of this happens.
I mean, isn't she just a classic abused girl? Like her first sexual experience is at the age of 13 in a completely mad power dynamic that she thinks she has power in and she certainly feels powerful in. But actually, in later years, when on looking back, her father will be like, I should have killed that man, as he saw what was going on and no one was there to protect her. And she was the child of the helpers at the hotel, and people felt like they could do whatever and her parents wouldn't say anything. That doesn't seem to me like someone in any kind of position of power. She thought she wrought power out of that situation as and interpreted that way. But I don't think in any real terms anyone felt that this teenager running around with these tourists was powerful by any stretch of the imagination. And when her life is upended as a result of one of those relationships, and other people lose their lives not as a result of her relationship, but in the same context, it all kind of comes to her like, what was she thinking when people who have the power to kill others, which is what essentially happens, she's running around with them. She has some impact, but even she's aware that she's had some serious delusions of grandeur, which will haunt her for some time to come. No, I don't think she's powerful at all. In the way that any of us are powerful, right? We all have a certain amount of power, but I don't think she has any special power. And these men use this claim that she makes about having power to explain their own awful pedophilic behavior.
I actually found myself getting angry with her, with the relationship she had with the developer, the investor. I can't remember his name, guess what? But
Odie.
Odie. Yeah, I didn't see the power. Well, I didn't see the power line with her in that instance. I thought she was completely mesmerized by this guy who was undeserving of her attention, really. And I just couldn't understand why she kept, making herself subservient almost, to this guy. So I just found myself getting angry with that relationship, very angry. It's almost as if, as a parent, you want to. I don't do physical things to my children. I don't shake them or beat them, but you have that feeling, shake sense into their heads. That's what I remember most about her. What you call a power play, or what you ask Roger if it's a power play. That relationships
I
too.
do think there's something interesting happening with the character of Calypso, right? Where you have this young woman who is comfortable in her sexuality and is confident in it. And I think there's something quite powerful in that. But and something, yeah, quite interesting about it as well in a Caribbean context, I think, particularly where around her she's surrounded by people with much more conservative sexual mores than she is upholding. Um, but I think that's where her power kind of ends.
But then I remember reading that particular section of the novel, and I think that's when I pulled off like 150 pages in one night, because I was sitting there like wondering if this is normal, if this is something that would typically happen, where this young girl thinks that she has some power, um when really she's just being exploited. I was really shocked by that. I couldn't even believe it, to be honest. So I guess.
Tony mentioned something about wanting to shake her.
Mhm.
I think that what that brought up for me was the parents not speaking to her about this. The parents took the position that perhaps if they ignored it, it would go away, and of course it wouldn't, because I think maybe part of all of that, all of the mistakes she was making with Odie, I think I would lay a lot of that blame on her parents for not stopping her, because her parents knew what was going on. So yeah.
Were they ignoring it because Odie was white? I mean, I'm going
And
to
rich and foreign.
rich and foreign, because I'm getting the sense that there's a lot of that sort of legacy that we have with our relationship with white people in this part of the world. That they, well, we call it white privilege, but it's more. It goes deeper than that with us. It's like they're allowed to do a lot of stuff, and we're allowed to, and we are going to turn a blind eye when we see our children being subservient to them, and so on. So I think all of that is why I was getting angry as well, Paula. I definitely wanted to do the shake thing there. Um,
You see,
Yeah.
now you mention it, perhaps that was part of the dynamic, but I honestly did not get that impression. I think that was just their style of parenting, to let her do whatever she wanted to do and hope she grew and hope she would grow out of it. I did not get the impression that they felt intimidated in any way by Odie.
Were, were they
I
not
didn't.
intimidated by Z? Sorry.
Right. That's what I was gonna jump in to say, that I think part of it too was because of and we're speaking about power and their relationship with Z, who pretty much like controlled their lives, and that might have made them hesitant to do anything that would anger OD, because Z was all tied up in this big development as well, right? And I think there was even a point in time where he made reference to it, that if something happened to OD, then this would affect his investment. So I think that whole dynamic with her parents and Z came into it as well. But I agree with Paulo though, that this is like terrible parenting. Like they literally just, and I mean they knew from the time she was 13 and they just ignored it.
But is sorry.
No,
Is it
I was just gonna say it might be the type of parenting that they're accustomed to, because uh, Atlas, for example, he had terrible parenting, so it's just like a generational curse, in my opinion.
I was gonna say, isn't it also a picture of the middle classes policing the behavior of the working classes, and the white and allowing white people to exploit working class black people? Is there not something of that dynamic in their relationship between the parent and the child? The middle classes who are this kind of idea that they're born to rule, right? In the place of the white people that have now left in independent Barbados. Everyone's looking at me like I'm talking
no, no, no.
nonsense.
I'm with you, Kesso. I'm with you.
It's
I'm
a
just trying to.
theory.
No, no, no. It's a theory that I can accept. I'm just thinking it through. That this is a novel about the middle class, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, Paula and I had a conversation with Jasmine, and she is unapologetic about it, which is fine. And yes, this is, to me, Barbados middle class. Not that it is dissimilar to other Caribbean islands, but it is particularly acute in Barbados because of we know their history and we know their long relationship with the colonizers. And so the middle class, you know what we call it here in St. Vincent, Kessawa, the emerging black middle class, we call them the black aristocracy because they carry the same value system, just with a different color, really. And yeah, that's it's a theory about that dynamic that I can accept.
But what other value system could colonized people have but the value system of the colonizer?
Well, I think one of the arguments would be that, like, the distance to the colonizer makes the middle classes more not perceptive, that's not what I mean. Susceptible to the imbibement or the imbibing of their values, right? And that the working classes, I mean, it's a theory, right? That there's a kind of with distance comes space to build their own value systems, to create their own spaces, and also to hold on to the traditions that they brought from Africa.
But also, education is one of the reasons, one of the means of becoming middle class.
Mhm.
And education is colonial. Our education system is entirely colonial.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing at all. I think I'm merely, yeah. I think I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah, I agree with Paula, but Paula, I am just not prepared to cut them all the slack in the world because of the values that they adopted through education and socialization, etc. Because there are families, and I'm sure yours, I know you long enough, um, that were radical in their thinking and broke away from that and took us in a different direction. Middle class just the same, educated just the same, but were far more conscious in not being that photocopy of the colonizers. So I am not prepared to cut all that slack, Paula, as if it's a done deal. They have no choice, you know. Just saying.
I mean, there is a song, "Sitting Pretty and Smiling." A lot of people in the middle class sit pretty and smile, and they figure, well, I'm benefiting from this. I'm not changing anything. So I think that is it of itself. But um, for now, unfortunately or fortunately, we will take the reading from Jasmine Seeley, and it is taken from the prologue of the novel.
Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine Seeley and I am a Bajan Canadian writer based in Vancouver, Canada. And I'm going to be doing a reading today from my debut novel, which is called The Island of Forgetting. It's a multi-generational family saga set on a small family-owned hotel in Barbados, and it follows the lives of 4 members of the same family spanning from the 1960s until present day, as they grapple with some intergenerational trauma and the fallout of some deeply held family secrets. Today, I'm going to be reading from the very beginning of the novel, which is the prologue. It introduces us to the patriarch of the family, who is named Iapetus. Prologue, Iapetus, 1962. Most days, I don't exist. I've always been good at hiding, at finding the shadowy places where I can go to be forgotten. When I was a little boy, I could slither through burglar bars like a greased cat, fold myself into cupboards, alone in the dark for hours, only the dust to play with. Anybody who grows up a target learns from young how to make themselves as small as possible. Though maybe that's bullshit. Just look at my brother. He took the most hits of all, and it's as if he sucked them in like hot air, expanding. Now he's larger than life, a big man in a big house. And I'm the mongoose who lives in the gully, the rat in the cane field, the stray dog beneath the floorboards. Cronus, my brother, tells me to forget. That's what I'm trying to do. And some days I can. Some days I feel like I done walked this whole island top to bottom. Walk until the sunburnt road scald my bare feet, and then keep walking till I can't feel even that. Walk past chattel houses painted pretty pastel, eaves dripping pride like icing on a cake. Walk past brick houses with swimming pools, past schools and farms and churches. Walk through the center of the island where you can't see an arm's length in front of you for all the cane. Snap off a piece of it and suck it dry. In the villages where folks know me, sometimes I can sweet talk one of the shop women into giving me a rock cake to fill my stomach. Pass by the rum shop and beg a bottle off one of the boys if they're feeling generous. Sip it as I walk through Bridgetown. Past the careenage where the boats bob pretty on the green water. On the sidewalk, locals and tourists alike dress fine for a day in town. I walk with my feet in the gutter so as not to get in their way. Here, too, I disappear. I'm invisible in a different way. I'm a drunkard, just like my father was. Or worse, a madman. No one looks me in the eye too long. School children laugh at me. Church ladies clutch their purses and cross the street when I pass. Keep walking. Eventually, one way or another, I always reach the shore. It's harder to hide on the beach. Men like me stick out on the white sand like skid marks. Sun too bright, hotels crawling with policemen who sweat in their starched uniforms. Can never stay on the beach too long. All those bare bodies, all that sun glaring off the sea like polished silver. The tourists eye me warily out the corner of their eyes as if I'm a black cloud blowing in to ruin their vacation. They don't want to see me, don't want to know that I exist. Have to get back to the hills, to the gullies and the springs and the fields, to the cool, dark earth where I can be alone. Alone, always alone, but never free.
That was a reading by Jasmine Seeley. Thank you for staying with us. In that, she focused on Iapetus, the character of Iapetus. So a question that I could throw to the panel is, did you like the author's use of the Greek mythological figures?
I like the fact that she turned the Calypso story on its head. Um, in the Homer has Odysseus as a victim, and she turned that whole story on its head. Certainly, Calypso. There is a kind of a play that Calypso is keeping him in Barbados against his will, but the power dynamic in this novel, the power lies with Odie. It certainly does not lie with Calypso. So, and and then it also gives her, she gives herself room to talk about female sexuality. And so I like the fact that she plays with that, because, well, you know, in the Calypso myth, Calypso is kind of punished for her sexuality. And there is, I don't know how well you'll remember this story, the Calypso story, but
Not that well, Paula. Tell us.
well, one
Been
of
a
it, it's
while.
just that there's one part of the Calypso story that stays with me. The fact that when Zeus sends his messenger down to tell Calypso to let Odysseus go, Calypso says, "You male gods are always doing this to us women gods. Whenever we find a man and we like him, you have to come and mash it up." That is essentially what the complaint she makes. And so that story is about a woman claiming power over her sexuality, and in some respects, Calypso is claiming power over her own sexuality. Not it, well, life is never neat, so it's not her claim her claim to her power over her sexuality is not neat. But I like that. I like the fact that she decided, first of all, to make it's very clear that Odie is no victim.
Any other comments on that in terms of the author's use of the Greek mythological figures?
I'll just say that I thought it was interesting the way they kept the family dynamics, as far as I understand.
Mm. Yeah. Eric?
Right. I think there's play in it. Obviously, there's a meaning. There's irony. Nautilus, who almost drowns and loves the water, but also has somewhat of a fear of water at the same time. And he's the only character that we follow off of the island.
Mhm.
So
I guess another line that we could put to this question is this is a Bayesian novel with these
Mm.
types of names. I found that really interesting. I was probably just expecting maybe a few Johns or Mary or even a Jasmine, but here you have these Greek names. So I like that aspect. I like that Jasmine Seeley presented that aspect in her novel.
Yeah, I take up Keswa on follow on with what Keswa said. I think the names to me also provided that sort of glue, ancestral glue, if you know what I mean. So it's what happened in the next generation, and using the Greek mythology connection to bring that out. I also found that quite clever, for want of a better word.
Yeah, I quite liked how she transposed that, the Greek mythology to the Barbadian and the Caribbean context. And to continue on from something that Roger said about, the names, like, you're expecting Bayesian names, but they're not. And I'm thinking that in a way that helps us to kind of like distance ourselves a bit from the fact that this is happening in Barbados, which might maybe allow us to appreciate more the story that she's trying to tell, because we're not trying to like compare it to actual, real time Barbados, even though it's set in modern Barbados. But the fact that it's being told through basically a fable kind of gives us the distance to maybe see what else it is she's trying to teach us in this book.
The
And that
names thing could be a little bit problematic, though, because our colonizers, our slaveholders gave us Greek and Roman names to make fun of us. We have a lot in some, for example, a lot of the names that we were given as enslaved people have remained as family names. We have a lot of Catos. I can't think right now off the top of my head, but there are quite a few. So it does make me a little uncomfortable, because those names were given to us to basically to disrespect us. So yeah.
Yeah. Just added on to Francine's point, I think um, I think I do agree there with Francine in terms of showing it shows the depth of our literature in the Caribbean. I think that's what Page Turner's Plus has been doing for the last 11 months or so. We've been showing the depth of Caribbean literature, and so here's Jasmine Seeley showing that she could sort of transpose this story, this mythology into the Caribbean perspective, and show us that we do have very similar situations here, and we just need to write and read more about it. So another
But
question
that's
that I could, oh, go ahead, Paula.
just
Go
no,
ahead.
just on that point. That's not all
Yes.
that revolutionary. Walcott, Walcott has Omerus, and Walcott has what else? There's another one I can't remember. So it's not unheard of. Walcott certainly has done it.
Yes, definitely. So I guess I could throw out here. Can you see any similarities with novels we have read recently? I don't know who wants to start with that, but I could start. So definitely in terms of how the one armed sister sweeps her house by Sherry Jones, and in terms of showing the underbelly of tourism, I think that was a predominant theme in this novel, where you have tourists coming to our shores and basically seeking the fourth S, which is sex. And I think that's something that a lot of people in the Caribbean tend not to speak about, but it is a big thing. Sex tourism is a big thing in the Caribbean, and with it comes exploitation. And there was even a huge documentary in the Dominican Republic where tourists come to the Caribbean just to seek virgins, and they think it's a big thing for them to come and do that. So I think these novels have done a really good job of highlighting that problem in the Caribbean, speaking about taboo topics. So I really like that aspect. Anyone
Mhm.
else? Eric?
Yeah, definitely. When Nautilus goes to Toronto, and he doesn't want to go to Toronto. He's like the only. He's like one of he's the only character, the only main character of the family who actually wants to stay on the island. But for the situation he gets in, and also because of his the revelation of his sexuality, he shipped off to Toronto, and it's it's challenging to say the least. And there's no pie in the sky in Toronto. So that reminds me of the experiences of DGA and what Storm with Thunder. His experiences in Boston, really dark, literally cold, and just uh, hard life, I would say.
Tony?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the theme that you picked up about highlighting the underbelly of tourism, as was done in How the One Arm Sister Sweeps a House. I think also what Jasmine Seeley has done here is show this commoditization of our friendliness. That's a thing here we're known for. Island people friendly, but it becomes a commodity, and that gives me discomfort, and I know it gives her discomfort, and I think it gives everybody on this panel discomfort. This commoditization of who we are as individuals, and so the tourists come to these friendly, all smiling, beaming face people, um, and we lay our wares before them. So yeah, I think it does that too.
I think it also, one of the reasons perhaps we're discomfort is because of our kind of generosity of spirit is considered a weakness actually, and to be exploited. And that's what I think really comes out in the novel as well. And that's why when I talk about acquiescence, it's the idea in trying to make sure that everyone's getting along and we're all okay. Like we're also ripe open for kind of exploitation, and that happens. I think the novels that it reminded me of a lot of were a novel we read a long time ago, guys. Who remembers Land of Love and Drowning? When we
Yes.
read that as a group, as part of the Caribbean Book Club, I think for me, there's that kind of generational stuff in there by Tiffany Yannick, Land of Love and Drowning, but also a novel that isn't technically one of ours. Can I say it? Homecoming by Yajiasi, or Segu by Maryse Condé, which we also read together. Novels that cover kind of multiple generations and follow this kind of long history. I think this definitely sits in that are kind of rooted in the Caribbean, but they have longer kind of stories behind them. I think are the ones that jump out at me, on top of the ones that you obviously said. Cherry Jones is an obvious one. And also, can I shout out Monique Rothry's Mermaid of Black Conch, again treating tourism and how that kind of distorts relationships in the Caribbean context. And Leonie Ross's novel, because I think she kind of does the opposite. She kind of focuses on us when we're on our own and what a beautiful people we are. And I think there's a little bit of that in Jasmine Seeley, who talks about some of the negative sides of it. But I think underneath there's a love that she wants it all to work out okay, right? She wants it to be well. And she's pointing out these issues and where we've gone wrong in this family as a kind of proxy for the nation or even the region.
I like the way, though, that it is unlike some of the other novels, and not that I don't like the way the other novels express what I'm going to say, but Seeley does it through middle class lens, and she does it very well. She does it in a way that you don't feel offended, as if she's looking down on I don't want to call another novel that to me did that, but you know what I'm talking about, Francine. Yeah, she does it very skillfully.
We all know, Tony.
Yes, I know, we all know. She does it very skillfully, and I have to say, Roger, that we haven't really spoken too much so far on the quality of the writing, and I want to put it on record that her style of writing is is the sort of style that blows me away. It is simple, it is succinct, it says just enough, it keeps you hanging. she is a brilliant writer, and I really want to get that point across. She's excellent at her writing.
I definitely have to agree with you there.
Mm.
Paula, you wanted to say something?
No, I'm just agreeing with Tony. I was absolutely amazed at how young she was. I was one after I read it, I was like, what have I done with my life? If she's writing if she's writing like this at her age.
Yeah, I agree. The writing is smooth as butter.
Yeah.
It kept me going. There were no lapses, no lulls in the story, and again, I'm becoming a real fan of these multi-generational stories. Probably because I'm a historian, I have that penchant toward those type of stories. But some of those stories can be done badly. But this one, oh, and I actually appreciated that it's not all even because she spends a lot of time with Calypso. And I didn't have a problem with that because the Calypso story was so rich and so deep and so troublesome and so problematic and all the things that we already talked about. So I'm glad she devoted a good chunk of the text to Calypso.
She
Excellent
also does
writing.
something quite unusual in that. I think those of us who are female on the panel, normally we love a woman who's a main character, and Calypso is kind of the loudest voice of the women in the novel. And she's not the most likable of characters, certainly in the beginning, and even towards the end when you see the kind of mother she is to Nautilus, not to give too much away. Um, but yet, so the men are kind of very much the main characters in lots of ways, but it didn't burn, it didn't annoy you. You weren't like, there's all these men talking, I want to hear from a woman. You're like, no, it's okay, let them talk. She's doing a fine job with these men. And I think that's quite an achievement, I think, because I think we love a feminist novel in this club.
It's
On this show.
interesting though that you say that she's not likable. I loved Calypso. She has her problems, but I didn't find her in the least bit not likable. I loved her.
Let me take that back. Perhaps unlikable isn't the right word. I think she's not an immediately lovable character. Is probably what I mean. I think she's running off after this man. She's sneaking out because we talked a little about how her parents knew. Well, she was waiting until they fell asleep to leave the house. Like she's a real teenager from a
I guess it's
TV show.
because I'm a parent and a girl parent. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I also I think I mean it's probably just a Kessel John thing, but like she has this thing where she doesn't like other girls in her class, and I'm always suspicious of girls who don't like other girls. I'm always like, oh, is it
But
you,
the other
honey?
girls,
Are
Yeah,
you
but
with
the other
someone?
the other
girls,
girls
the
are mean
other,
to her.
yeah, the other girls were mean. Yeah,
In this
like
particular context, it worked out okay.
I wouldn't say I disliked her. Like there were things about her that I was like, yeah, you go. Like she was really honest about a lot of things, and was not afraid to like just be like, hey, this is it, and I like that about her. But she was problematic. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, she was a teenager.
Yeah, she was a teenager.
That's
She
And
was
I'll
also
exactly
say
a
my
little bit
point.
arrogant. She was also a
that's
bit
one of the
arrogant,
things that I appreciated about this novel, that all of the main characters, like in each section, was it focused on a 17-year-old, and I just really like that she structured the novel that way, and that they were like the focus. And even though you knew, for example, like we knew everything about Calypso's parents, but then when it was Calypso's turn, they kind of faded into the background and the focus was on the 17-year-old. And just really beautifully written. I actually first listened to this on audio in June, and I was hooked within like the first 10 minutes. I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe how brilliant this is. Just and reading it, because sometimes you wonder, is it going to feel the same when I read it as when I listen to it? And like, well, I rated it higher after reading it. So
I
just
So
wanted
said
to
that
go.
from the first sentence, I was grabbed and I was like, "Oh, I'm reading this. Like, I want to know what's going to happen next." Like
yeah.
instantly, it wasn't like a slow burner or I'll give it a go or I have to read it, so I guess I read it. I was like, "I'm reading this book. This is a book. I'm taking my lunch break. I'm gonna read my book. I'm not talking to anyone. I'm not going for a walk. I'm like, I want to read this book. I need what happens. I need to know. Like it was a great read. Like it was a great novel.
I don't
Um,
need to guess when we come to the rating section how you're going to rate this book, Kesso. But Francine, is there a bit of with the using the young, the teenager, the young adult, as the central narrators in the book characters, if you want to. That's a kind of feel of clap when you land, because I think Roll J had asked that question about similarities, and
Yeah, definitely, because
yeah.
the characters would have been around the same age. And one of the things
So
that
is it because these authors are young people
possibly,
themselves?
and
Yeah.
I'm wondering also because as you said that, it occurred to me that in the Caribbean especially, teenagers aren't really given a voice, like no one listens to them. I'm speaking as someone who was a teenager in the Caribbean. Like, you're supposed to go to school, do your schoolwork, get your good marks, and then go to university. And like, no one really thinks about your inner life. So I really love that she's showing the inner life of 17-year-olds in the Caribbean, and I think that's just brilliant.
I'm going to be completely honest and say, until you said it just now, Francine, I had not realized that the reason the years change is because they're each time they're 17. I had not picked that up. And that's one of the things I love about this novel. It's clever on so many levels, right? Between us, we're going, oh, I didn't realize he was for Zeus. Oh, I didn't realize that they were 17. There's so many layers. It's so, so, so clever. If I was going to use it one word for the novel, I'd say it's just very, very clever. But entertaining with it, right? You're fully immersed and fully enjoying it. I'm sorry, it's not the rating section yet. I just wanted to say, how good is this book? Oh my god!
No,
Nautilus, Roger. So I'm going to, with your permission, ask a question. If the other page turners here found that Nautilus was the ultimate manifestation of Calypso, Calypso's story is almost incomplete with her improprieties and a little promiscuity, and there we have Nautilus, who was the one who escaped the island, but what happened after he escaped? To me, his life was quite a wreck, to be honest. And what I saw in him was the same subservience I saw in his mother, to the person he. I don't want to give too much away, but to the person who he had this sexual relationship with.
But I want to challenge you about the use of the word escape. Nautilus did not escape the island. He had no wish to leave the island.
Okay, so he was sent.
he
Yes,
was
that's
banished.
he was banished. You're right.
Yeah.
This
You're
is
right. Sorry.
exactly the word I was going to use.
Sorry. Yes, he was banished, but in a sense, he was the one who, although banished, got off the island, not by his own
Calypso,
volition.
Calypso did leave too now.
Yeah, she did.
Yes.
And I think earlier someone said something to the effect of everybody wanted to leave. You're forgetting Zed. Zed never wanted to leave. Zed was very specific. Zed says, I don't want to go to England where Eric Clapton is saying this is a white country. I am very happy here. So it's not just when Nautilus goes to Toronto and finds out that the outside world, well, the first world is not heaven. Before that, there is Zeus who is saying, no, I am happy here. This makes me happy.
Can I add to that as well, Paula? Even before he says that, don't forget that much of the novel's center point revolves around the fact that their grandfather, Zeus's father, no, Zeus's grandfather went abroad, right? That's what the whole novel turns around, and had a terrible experience in the war. So Europe has already been kind of pointed out to be full of a hell for Black people because he's damaged by that war and he damages his family as a result, and his family are then damaged. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a vicious cycle. Outside is very much hell, whilst being the space where the white people that are rich and foreign come from, and so representing opportunity as well.
Yeah. But the point Tony raised about Nautilus taking a subservient role in his sexual relationship. I suppose you could look at it that way, but I think one of the things that the novel deals with is that we haven't discussed is mental health. That's a very important theme in the novel. From as the Nautilus's lover has a serious mental health issue, But the novel talks about mental health on so many different levels. Calypso certainly has mental health issues. Nautilus himself has mental health issues. All of them probably have mental
Well,
health
the
issues.
prologue, Iapetus. I mean,
Yeah,
it's that.
well,
Yeah,
yeah,
you know.
precisely. Iapetus is a walking the street madman, you know. Then they deal with Cleone's
Postpartum
the
depression.
postpartum depression. So it's a running theme. Mental health is a running theme in the novel, and I'm very happy that she did that, because that is a topic which we need to discuss as Caribbean people. We don't discuss it because mental health still has all of these. It's still a taboo topic. It's still something we don't discuss when every single one of us has mental health issues. All of us have mental health issues, and we all have relatives who are as ill as Iapetus, and or certainly we would, all of us deal with things as mundane as Cleone's illness, and there's a lot of depression too, and a lot of the characters suffer from some form of depression. Even Mr. Zeus, Zed, the all powerful Zed, has some serious mental health issues. You remember Odie describes him as a very messy drunk. Those are not the exact words, but he's an alcoholic, and when he's drunk, he is weeping. He's telling all the family secrets. So he gives Odie all this weapon that Odie uses against Calypso, but I don't want to reveal the story.
But all right, so mental illness. I think we can all agree that that's a major part of the story. But also, as the narration goes, we're also confronted with the issue of the possibility of a family curse. Are these two things playing against each other, or is Jasmine Seeley very adroitly and subtly saying that mental illness can run through a certain line of a family, but is also connected to past trauma?
I think that's exactly what she's saying. I don't think it's, yeah.
Hmm. I would have gone for intergenerational trauma, what she was pointing to, because it all begins with trauma, doesn't it? And then it's passed down until it's dealt with. You know, we forget until we can't keep forgetting, and we're forced to remember. And we will only heal once we begin to remember, to acknowledge that hurt, to deal with the traumas that have been haunting this family for 4 generations, and by extension, this nation.
Unf-
But Roger, before you
yeah,
bring it to an end, I think the forgetting theme is directly related to that trauma that this family tries to bury as they go along, but it haunts them. Eric calls it a curse. It's there. It's not going away, right? So as much as you try to forget it, um, it still is very present.
that's a very good point there, Tony. And we'll start with you with your ratings.
I'll be very brief. Five. I just love this book. I thought it is a book that was not excessive like some books that I've read. It grabbed me from the word go. Um,
Yeah.
it it the story developed at the sort of pace that kept me glued, and I felt that it dealt with a topic that had many layers, and I'm going to recommend it as a very good read. Five, Roger.
Kesua,
Devastating, heartbreaking, wonderful, beautiful. 5. Thank you, Jasmine Seeley, for writing this.
Eric,
Oh my goodness, guess what? You're cracking me up today. I give it a 4. I love the novel. I did feel like there's some room to for improvement upon the story itself, and but solid 4 out of 5.
Francine,
Oh, it's a 5 for me all the way. I give the audiobook a 4, but that was more about the narration. Not that the narration is bad. I do recommend listening to the audiobook, but it wasn't perfect narration. But then when I read it again, I closed it. I immediately went to Goodreads. 5 stars. Beautiful story, wonderfully told. just beautiful writing, so lyrical, just so imaginative, and yet so like Barbadian, you know. Underneath it all, there's the Bayesian there, so just absolutely wonderful.
I feel like we could skip Paula, but Paula,
Definitely a five. No doubt whatsoever. Five.
Hmm.
and for me, I'll give it a 4.5, just because for me the ending, I feel a lot of things just went unresolved. That, but the writing was absolutely beautiful. Yes, a four
I
and a half.
cried at the ending, and you know when I cry, that's 5 stars straight away, right?
The ending was devastating, but I was like, yo,
The
I need to
ending
be
was brilliant. I don't know
quiet. I need to be in a
what
quiet
No,
corner
Rogie
with my
drank
I
this
thoughts and
morning.
thought it was
feelings.
perfect, and I
It was a
love
brilliant
how
ending.
she bookended the story with
Ay, ay,
Iapetus.
ay, ay.
Just
Roger.
like
Ay,
perfect,
ay,
man.
ay.
Come on, Roger.
And just how we ended on this this controversial note. The next time you see us, we'll be interviewing Jasmine Seeley, and we'll have more answers for you from this beautiful book. Thank you for joining us. Have a lovely day.